Hi. Hello. Good evening. Welcome to Chicago Reacts. My name is Rachel Ablavi. I am a model here in Chicago. And tonight, this is a wild card, I was told, so I have no idea what I'm in for. It is called The History Behind Das Finale by Potential History. And this was suggested by your happy locust. So, thank you, my happy locust, even though I know that your name is Yor. I respect your pronouns. I really do. If you're new here, old here, around here, far away, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment down below, and if you haven't checked it out before, link in the bio to our Discord where you can be in the know on everything Chicago Reacts and chat with us. So, without further ado, I think it's time that we get into this. Here we go.
It's coming right at us!
Yay!
Nuna! Clara! You can't speak Russian on the battlefield!
Remember, no Russian.
We can finish them if we charge now! Yes, charging in is what we do! That's right, because it always works.
What?
Mako, start going as if you're trying to run away but can't quite make it.
What does that even mean?
Some of you may remember that the history behind Girls in Panzer was one of the first real series I did here, if you could even call it that, and in celebration of 100,000 subs, / reaching the Patreon goal, / all of the comments, I have decided to finally do the history behind their film. But beforehand, I will reiterate my disclaimer from the original videos to the skeptics. I am really not an anime fan. In fact, this is the only series I have ever watched. And I will say that, objectively, the premise is very stupid. But I keep coming back to it because there are layers and layers of good historical references made in it, and you can tell the people who made it really cared. Even certain tank gods. And also, even with how stupid some of the physics are, it's just really fun to watch. And before you watch this one, if you haven't yet, I recommend you watch my historical analysis on the series first, because there's a lot of references and tanks explained there that I'm not going to mention here because I've already done them. I'll be focusing on elements that are more new to the movie. Also, a fair bit of the movie itself is just plot, which I'll probably just mostly skip over because it's not historical, and to be honest, the plot is kind of garbage. Also, I managed to find a dub of the movie for the clips, which I'm sure you'll all be very happy about.
Yay!
The film opens with the British team, St. Gloriana's, taking cover in a sand trap on a golf course surrounded by Ori in a post-tournament exhibition match of combined high school teams as the Finns watch from afar. More on them later. A referee Yokosuka P1Y plane is seen overhead watching the match. It is then that we meet a new team, Chiatan Academy, or the Japanese. This team sports mostly early variant Type 97 Chiha tanks. The Type 97 was designed in 1936 as an improvement on the Type 95 Light, and saw many of the same features such as the bell crank suspension used on it. It was the second most produced tank by the Imperial Japanese Army in World War II, and saw service on all fronts till the end of the war. There are also a few Type 95 Ha-Go tanks, which was the Japanese interpretation of the 7-ton light seen popping up in many countries in the early 30s.
I thought he wasn't going to talk about the tanks that much.
During the war, especially up against the US and Red armies, these tanks fared very poorly against newer, heavier vehicles, as these were meant to be infantry tanks to support the infantry, and the Japanese didn't really care too much about heavy armor or large guns on them, as Japan's main focus during their development was on...
Okay, I should give a disclaimer also. I personally am not a history person, and it was always my blow-off class. I was so disrespectful to my history teachers in high school. But that was then, and this is like 7 years later, so I get it's okay. It's okay. This history lesson is 15 minutes long, and I can learn. Learning is good. It is part of the dimensions of wellness. Intellectual wellness. Okay, I can do it.
China, a country with no significant tank force. For more information on this, and the Ha-Go in particular, check out the video I did on the inside of the Ha-Go tank. Miho orders the Ori and Chihitan force to advance, which after a bit the Japanese interpret as an order for an all-out charge Banzai style. And it's fun to see the Japanese have a sense of humor about themselves and continue the running gag of school cultural stereotypes. 2 Matilda IIs are taken out along with most of the Japanese team, and the British are able to escape once their allies, the Russians, come and relieve them. Coming from the other side are a handful of Mark VI Crusader tanks led by fan favorite Rosehip. The Crusader was an early to mid-war cavalry tank, boasting ridiculous speeds of up to 40 miles per hour, making them excellently suited for the deserts in the North African campaign. However, these tanks were plagued with mechanical problems, which became their Achilles heel. By the time these issues were sorted out, though, the tank was outclassed. The show, though, really plays to their speed with some ridiculous maneuvers pulled off by it. Ori quickly finds itself surrounded and falls back to the city as the Finns judge them. There is then a long chase with multiple British and Russian tanks being lost, along with a few from Ori. The funniest one being the M3 Lee being killed by Nona's IS-2.
Okay, so when a tank blows up, do the people inside die? Or, like, when a tank is blown over, do the people inside die? I'm so confused because I, like, don't understand the premise at all. I wish you would have given me just a touch of plot of what's going on, because to me, what I've gotten so far is that this is a class at school, and the girls are all in their tanks, and they're playing tank for gym class, and the 2 girls who are watching are skipping class, and they're just watching. I don't know where the teachers are. That's what I've gotten so far. Like,
Man,
see, are they
Nona's a
dead
cold
there?
Bitch. And I guess I'll address this now. All the tanks are once again moving way too fast. You have infantry tanks speeding along with cavalry tanks at certain points. I know I mentioned this in my videos on the series, but the movie cranks the speed factor up to 10. The girl in the Ha-Go hits her head on a World of Tanks reference when venturing into a no-fire zone, and there's a reference to Episode 3 with the Matilda on the lift. The KV-2 makes a short appearance before falling over and destroying itself right next to a D-Day reference, and the battle ends with Ori defeated when the Panzer IV flag tank is taken out after a bit more chase, and the Finns continue to judge from afar.
Yeah,
Then there's
see,
a
they're
fan
skipping
service scene
class.
because anime, where the characters discuss the coming semester.
Damn.
At the end, though, the president is called
Chelsea,
away,
the
and we are
redhead's
presented with the
boobies?
rising action of the story, which is basically this guy, Tankery Hitler, going back on his promise to keep Ori open if they won the high school tankery tournament in the series. So now the school's getting shut down again. Also, it's weird to see a guy in this series. I thought they just had some kind of female mitosis thing going on in this universe. On a side note, I can kind of see why the next series is the final one, because the writers of this series only do one story. Their series and film are the exact same story with a couple details changed around, and the finale is pretty close to the same thing too. I'm still gonna watch it all, though. All the crews go to tell their tanks goodbye as the Ministry of Education is set to take them all. But right in time, the Americans swoop in a Lockheed C-5M Super Galaxy transport plane and secure the tanks as if they were oil or something. They take Ori's tanks to keep them out of the Ministry of Education's hands in an operation dubbed I Shall Return, which is the quote from Douglas MacArthur upon his being forced out of the Philippines by the Japanese in 1941. The next day, everyone leaves the ship and it sails away to be decommissioned. Everyone is loaded onto buses and they are taken to a holding area. That night, Saunders returns with Ori's tanks, airdropping them down in Operation I Have Returned, the words of Douglas MacArthur when he retook the Philippines in 1944. The next bit is a lot of plot, but there are some good references hidden inside, including Yukari cooking with German mess equipment next to a Zelt, and the History Club playing a military strategy game that looks like it's about the North African campaign. Miho and the gang head into town in the Panzer IV and stop to visit Nightmare Land. And that and this person become important later. Also, Yukari is my spirit animal.
For a guy named Punchy, he sure gets punched a lot.
Back in reality, the president attempts negotiations with Tankery Hitler, and over a few scenes with some help from other characters, is able to convince the Federation to let Ori fight against a college team to keep their school. As this is going on, Miho goes home, where you find out her and Maho are actually friends, and that her mother still holds a grudge against her for saving someone instead of winning a sport. There's then a flashback
This is
scene
a
with
sport?
the Panzer II, an early war German
guess
tank
that-
that saw
yeah.
service on all fronts with multiple variants produced, and was seen as the workhorse of the German army from 1939 through 40. Miho's mother meets with the mother of the leader of the university team they will be fighting, set to clips of University Shermans driving through a field of destroyed Panthers from another school as they discuss the match. The president returns to camp and tells everyone about the match, to much joy from the others, but worries about how few tanks they have, and that it's an annihilation match. Ori seems to have an out, though, as the other teams are seen traveling, with the British school on their ship, the Americans flying their C-5, the Russians traveling on a Zubar-class LCAC, a large fan-driven landing craft from the late 80s, the Germans in an LZ-217 Graf Zeppelin, the Japanese on a train, and the Finns in the forest. Because of course they are.
Venice.
All sending and receiving communications about a tea
They're Finnish. Yes. Finland. That's Finland. Yeah.
party they are invited to attend. At the qualification, the other schools provide additional troops and tanks, including a Tiger 1 and 2 and 2 Panthers from the Germans, various Shermans from the Americans, 2 T-3485s, an IS-2 and a KV-2 from the Russians, a Churchill, Matilda 2 and Crusader from the British, a CV-33 from the Italians, a BT-42 from the Finns, and multiple Type 97 and Type 95 from the Japanese. The leaders from each team meet in a tent to discuss strategy, and Mini Stalin makes a Cold War reference, with Maho shooting her down. Each commander also makes a joke about what their attack plan would be according to the stereotype of their country's army. After this, we formally meet the enemy, the All-Stars University team, who are essentially a post-war UN team consisting of mostly M26 Pershings. The Pershing was the Americans' answer to the heavy tanks popping up in late World War II from the Germans and the Soviets, and didn't see much service in World War II, but did in Korea. The design supported an excellent 90mm gun and good armor, but it suffered from reliability.
I'm just confused about, like, I mean, I know that this is like another universe, but this would be the most expensive sport ever. Like, the equipment is constantly being destroyed and it costs tens of thousands of dollars to replace. Like, plus the ammunition alone, like, I don't know. I don't buy it. I don't buy
Ability problems for most of its life. They also have a few M24 Chaffee light tanks. Built as a replacement for the Stuart, the Chaffee also saw limited service in World War II, as they could not be fielded in significant numbers in time, but saw service in Korea and are currently in service still in Uruguay. The command tank is a Centurion Mark I, a British post-war tank considered by many to be the first MBT. Although it missed World War II, Centurions were in service until the late 80s, seeing its heaviest service also in Korea. It was also, in my opinion, the only good British design during World War II, and it didn't even make World War II. Proceed to fight in the comments over that statement. The match begins with both teams moving forward, scouting for each other. Now, this battle is nearly an hour long, and a total clusterfuck of stuff going on. So instead of going through it blow by blow, because that would be boring, I'll briefly mention the bigger things and focus more on the references. But if you haven't, you definitely should watch it. Regardless of how inaccurate it is, it's just super fun to watch. The first action takes place in the woods, as the university team attempts to encircle Ori, and it goes very well for them.
Reporting damage to both the left and right tracks. Artillery's regained situation.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
The center of Ori's force makes it to the top of a hill, where this happens, much to everyone's confusion. Yukuri thinks it's a Sturmtiger, and the tanks are sent out to investigate. The hill force retreats, and in their chase, Clara and Nona go to the Great Gulag in the sky.
Miss Katusha, it's been an honor to fight alongside you.
Oh my god, I didn't even mention how dangerous it is. Like, wouldn't they be dying? I still don't know. Like, but wouldn't they be dying?
Wait, nobody dies in this sport. Why is Stalin so upset? The scout tanks soon find out that the large explosions were caused by a large Karl Garat mortar, a German 600mm siege mortar mounted on a mobile chassis. Although impressive, these weapons were very impractical during the war and saw limited service. They required large crews to man and defend and were extremely difficult to get from place to place, and they were mostly a large morale booster for German troops in the field. The scout tanks hatch a plan to kill it, with the BT-42 providing support. The BT-42 was a Finnish modification of Soviet BT-7 light tanks, adding a bigger turret and gun, and made in limited numbers. Now, as ridiculous and awesome as the BT scene is, it is made with the history of the vehicle in mind. Namely in two parts, the first being the large jump it made. The world record for longest jump made by a tank was made by a Soviet BT, so this is probably a reference to that. But with the BT-42 being heavier, I doubt it could make this, but that is what it's referring to. The second is it driving on its road wheels. The BT tanks did have this feature to shift the drive to its wheels when the tracks were taken off, but this was a bit of a process and didn't happen this quickly. After taking out a few Pershings that it probably couldn't, the BT is killed and the Hetzer makes a jump it could not make to kill the Carl. The battle then heads into a military-themed amusement park, and there are a ton of references within, including a Thomas the Tank version of a tortoise, a rat, a V-2 rocket, and a little fortified house called the Maginot House, in reference to the Maginot Line, just to name a few. The university team arrives and a lot of fighting ensues, most notably with the T-28 Super Heavy tank. This 100-ton American assault gun was developed late in the war to deal with the Siegfried Line on the German border. The idea was it would punch through the German defenses and the Germans would be unable to kill it in the process. However, the Siegfried Line had already been overrun by the time it passed its trials, and it was never used. The Japanese team are seen hiding and waiting for the enemy to pass them before they attack, in reference to Japanese late war strategy in the Pacific of letting American troops land and move inland a bit before opening fire to maximize casualties. The university team manages to herd Ori into one spot and anime ensues. Then there's a lot of street fighting where the teams are whittled down, mostly by Alice going ham. To the Tiger 1 and Panzer.
Okay, I'm confused as to how nobody dies in this sport because her head was literally showing when she was shooting. Like, couldn't somebody else have, like, murdered her? But the fact that nobody dies makes this seem like a lot of fun. Like, if this was a sport that my high school offered, I might have taken it. Or if this was a sport that my college offered, I would have taken it. Alas, where would that happen in Chicago? Can you imagine if, like, tanks are just roaming down the streets of your cities? Like, just like a small town in Nebraska or something. You have tanks, and then, like, the Nebraska team just comes and annihilates just, like, a bunch of infrastructure. But it's all for sport. Good sport! Good sport.
4 against the Centurion. There's a ridiculous chase scene that's basically Tokyo Drift, where Alice hesitates because she sees a bear, and Miho is able to claim victory. The Tiger tows the Panzer IV back, and everyone celebrates.
Good sport!
Well, there it is, and I hope this video at least somewhat lived up to your expectations of the months of requests. It probably didn't. But I just want to take a second at the end here to thank everybody for 100,000 subscribers and all of the support. And hopefully this long requested video shows at least a part of all the gratitude I have for it. When I started this channel, I figured I would probably just make videos for a few people for fun, and never would have imagined it would so quickly turn into the awesome community it is now. As always, I'd also like to thank my patrons on Patreon for making my videos possible, but this one especially because this was one of my goals, and
Yeah, okay. You can watch the rest of him thanking people, but I think we're gonna skip out on the final minute and a half of whatever he's talking about. As an anime, I don't think I would watch it just because, like, the super military themes do not personally appeal to me, but as a sport, I think that would be very entertaining, at least to play. I think it would be pretty devastating to watch. Like, you're just sitting on your porch and a tank rolls by and, like, blasts your garage and then leaves. And then another tank comes by and, like, runs over part of your car. And then somebody shoots at that tank and it takes the second story off your home. So I think it would be more fun to be inside rather than an observer, like the Finns, which are Finnish people. I made that connection much later than, not that I care to admit because I straight up admitted it, but, you know. Thank you so much for watching that with me. I'm sorry, I was going to wrap up, but I wanted to tell you about the other animes that I've watched. The only other animes that I've watched are Dr. Stone, which is so good. I liked it because it was like mostly based in reality. And when they do those like anime things of explaining what's going on and it takes a really long time, but in real time in their universe, it's like 2 seconds have passed. They're explaining science, which I think is pretty cool. And I really like Attack on Titan, although I did not finish it because I have this thing about finishing shows where I just rather leave them unfinished rather than like be disappointed by the ending. But I just found out that they're making another season, so maybe I'll pick it up again. I really like the really funny Titan runs. Like, it's just so funny. And I was nannying a baby, and the baby ran exactly like the Titans. And when he would put food into his mouth, it looked like the Titans eating people. So I like those ones. And I watched 3 seasons of Naruto before I got bored. And then I talked to my friend who loved that show, and he was like, yeah, there are episodes that do not like affect the carrying plot at all. And I was like, oh. He said, yeah, you can skip them. And I'm like, oh. And then I never went back to the show. So. I'm trying to remember if I watched anything else. I watched like this like high-rise takeover. It was really bad. And I feel like I started some other show and it was not that good either. There are my recommendations. Dr. Stone and Attack on Titan. Top-notch shows. If you like gore. And if you like science. Which is pretty cool. I have been Rachel Ablavi. This has been Chicago Reacts. If you come around here often or come around here once or twice, please subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't take up any of your time. It's just a click. And I know you're already clicking, so might as well click that button. And you can also like and leave me a comment. It takes just this much time, but makes me happy. Love to see it. I haven't anything else, so might as well say a peace out and a ta-ta for now. Thank you so much.